She was just a quiet, hard-working woman, someone who never asked for much and gave everything she had to the people around her. In a small village where everyone knows everyone, her life revolved around her family, her home, and the simple routines that gave her peace. She wasn't wealthy, she didn't dress to impress, and she didn't speak loudly, but her heart was full of patience and kindness. Still, that wasn't enough to protect her from what happened that day. What began as an ordinary family gathering quickly turned into something else, something cruel. Right in front of the people she loved the most, she was mocked, disrespected, and left standing there with no one rising in her defense. Words were thrown like stones, cutting, sharp, and humiliating. And what made it worse was who it came from. Not strangers, not outsiders, but people she once trusted with everything. The room fell silent, but no one spoke up. No one stopped it. She stood there alone, her eyes quietly searching for even one face that would show her kindness. But that moment never came. Why did they treat her that way? What had she done to deserve such shame in front of her family? Was it her simplicity, her silence, or something deeper that had been brewing behind closed doors? The pain didn't end that evening. The whispers continued. The judgment grew. And still, she didn't speak a word in her defense. But just when everyone thought she would accept her place in silence and shame, something changed. A quiet strength started to rise in her. And somewhere far from the noise, justice began to take shape, not the loud kind, but the kind that changes everything slowly, piece by piece. What happened next would shake the very people who once stood against her. But how did it all turn around? And who really helped bring the truth to light? Her name was Zainab. She wasn't the type to draw attention. She didn't chase after things like status or approval. She found joy in small things, planting flowers in her yard, preparing meals with care, and watching her children laugh during the evening tea. But in this household, her kindness was often mistaken for weakness. Ever since she married into the family, she felt like an outsider. Her husband, though not cruel, rarely stood up for her, and the rest, especially her sister-in-law Samina, saw her quiet nature as something to exploit. For years, small things piled up. She was blamed for things she didn't do, overlooked during decisions, and made to feel invisible. But she endured it all. She believed that if she kept doing good, people would see her heart. That day during the family gathering, everything she had bottled up was tested. Samina had found an excuse, something minor, and twisted it into a loud accusation. In front of elders, cousins, children, Zainab was made to feel like nothing. And the worst part, no one stopped it. Not even her husband. He just sat there, looking down, silent. Zainab quietly walked away that night, her dignity bruised but her spirit not yet broken. She didn't fight back. She didn't shout, but something inside her shifted. She began noticing things more clearly, the way some family members spoke behind closed doors, how Samina always turned others against her, and how her silence had been used to cover their wrongs for far too long. It wasn't just about that one evening. It was a pattern, a slow, steady attempt to push her down so others could stand taller. Still, she said nothing, but deep down, she was preparing. Not for revenge, but for something much more powerful. Quietly, she began writing down things, remembering conversations, keeping track of small but important details. Something was coming, a quiet storm, and those who thought she would never rise were about to be very surprised. In the days that followed, the house felt colder, not because of the weather, but because of the silence that had settled in. Zainab went about her chores as usual, but her eyes had changed. She no longer looked down when Samina passed by. She no longer tried to explain herself or smooth things over. She watched, listened, and waited. The others noticed too. There was a quiet distance forming, one they couldn't quite name but could feel. Something was shifting, and it made them uneasy. Samina, on the other hand, didn't stop. She continued, whispering into ears, twisting words, shaping stories to make Zainab look careless and undeserving. She played the victim now, saying Zainab was acting strange, trying to divide the family. And slowly, a few others began to believe her, especially those who always followed the loudest voice in the room. But not everyone. One of Zainab's nieces, Amina, had always watched things closely. She was young, but she wasn't blind. She had seen how Zainab was treated over the years. She remembered the small kindnesses, the way Zainab once stayed up all night with her when she had a fever, and how she never asked for anything in return. Amina began quietly asking questions of her own. Meanwhile, Zainab had started spending more time outside the house, meeting people she hadn't seen in years. She visited her old teacher, who now worked at the local council office. She spoke with a distant cousin who had studied law. These weren't casual visits. She was collecting strength in places others didn't expect. And she wasn't just looking for justice for herself anymore. She had started to see how her silence had protected more than just Samina. It had hidden other truths in the family, truths no one dared speak of, but time was running short. The family was planning another major gathering soon, and this time, Zainab wasn't coming to sit quietly in a corner. The day of the gathering arrived, and the air in the house felt different, thicker somehow, like everyone was holding their breath. Relatives had traveled in from other towns, food was being prepared in the kitchen, and laughter echoed through the halls. But beneath it all, there was tension. Everyone could sense it, even if they didn't speak of it. Zainab was quiet as always, helping with the arrangements, but her presence carried weight now. She moved with a calmness that didn't feel weak, it felt focused. Samina was more talkative than usual, greeting guests loudly, telling stories, making sure the spotlight stayed on her. But her eyes kept darting toward Zainab, watching her movements, trying to guess what she might do. She had heard rumors. Someone had told her Zainab had met with people outside the family. Someone said she was gathering proof about what, no one knew exactly. Samina tried to laugh it off, but inside, she was beginning to feel the pressure. The gathering began like most do polite conversations, tea served, children playing. But slowly, the room began to shift. One of the uncles, a respected elder, brought up a subject most had avoided for years: fairness within the family. He asked questions, simple ones, but they stirred something in the air. Then another voice joined Amina. Nervously at first, she spoke up about the way some people were treated differently, about how kindness was mistaken for weakness. The room fell silent, all eyes turned toward Zainab. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse anyone directly. Instead, she stood, holding a small folder in her hands. Inside were years of things she had kept: receipts, notes, messages, even voice recordings. Nothing dramatic, just quiet proof. Truths hidden in plain sight. She looked around the room, her voice steady, and said only one line: "I've stayed quiet long enough." The room froze. No one knew what she would reveal next. And for the first time, even Samina had nothing to say. Everyone stared at Zainab as her words echoed through the room. "I've stayed quiet long enough." For a moment, the only sound was the soft clinking of a spoon in a teacup. Then came the whispers, soft at first, then louder. What was in that folder? What was she about to say? But before she could open it, her father-in-law, the oldest and most respected man in the family, stood up. His voice trembled not with age, but with something deeper. "Before she says anything," he said, "I need to speak first." Zainab froze. This was unexpected. He turned slowly to the room, eyes heavy with regret. "There are things this family has buried for too long, things we thought would go away if we ignored them." Then he looked directly at Zainab. "She's not the only one who's been wronged." A heavy silence fell again. He went on to speak of years-old issues, how some property decisions had quietly favored certain family members, how others were left out of inheritance discussions. His voice cracked as he admitted that Zainab's treatment had been unjust, but not just by Samina. "We all failed her," he said, "because we let it happen in silence." Samina's expression changed from fear to disbelief. She hadn't seen this coming. In that moment, the spotlight began to shift not just to Zainab's evidence, but to the entire structure of the family. The issue was bigger than just one conflict. It was about favoritism, power, silence, and the cost of ignoring unfairness. When it doesn't affect you directly, but just when it seemed like truth was about to pour out, Samina stood up, trembling with anger. "If we're opening old doors," she snapped, "then let's open all of them." She looked directly at her father, then at Zainab. "You think she's the only one with secrets?" Gasps spread through the room. There was more, much more. The room stood frozen as Samina's voice rang out, her face flushed with rage. "You all think she's the only one with a story? You think I've had it easy?" Her voice cracked, and suddenly, her anger turned into something else: pain. "You always saw me as strong, outspoken, but do you know why I fought so hard to stay in control?" She pulled out a worn envelope from her purse, one no one expected. Inside were letters, old, torn, and marked with a name everyone recognized. Her late mother. She held them up. "I was promised this house, my mother's dying wish, but it was taken from me without a word." Just like Zainab was left without a voice, the family murmured in confusion. Even the father-in-law looked stunned. He sat back down slowly, a weight falling over him. "We thought we were protecting the family by keeping things quiet," he whispered. "But maybe we were only hiding our shame." Zainab looked at Samina, not with anger but with understanding. In that moment, two women who had spent years on opposite sides saw something different in each other. Wounds passed down through silence, misunderstandings fed by power struggles. It was never just about insults or favoritism, it was about pain no one knew how to speak. Zainab stepped forward and placed her folder gently on the table. "Then let's stop hiding," she said quietly. "Let's face everything." Together, the family, caught between shock and relief, began to shift. Voices softened. A few even apologized. It felt like a new chapter might finally begin. But just as the mood began to ease, one of the uncles received a message on his phone. His face went pale. He turned to the group and spoke in a low voice. "There's a lawyer coming tomorrow. Someone from outside the family. Someone Zainab contacted weeks ago." Everyone turned back to her. She didn't deny it. She just nodded. "I said I'd speak the truth," she replied. "But some truths need to be heard in front of the law." The next morning arrived quietly, but everyone in the house felt the weight of what was coming. The lawyer Zainab had contacted showed up right on time, calm, polite, and prepared. The family gathered again, this time not out of tradition, but necessity. Papers were presented, timelines explained, and truths that had been whispered for years were finally brought into the light. It wasn't about punishment. Zainab wasn't trying to break the family. She just wanted fairness. She wanted to make sure the next generation didn't inherit the same silence that had hurt so many before them. As the lawyer outlined past property decisions and family agreements, it became clear that some mistakes were made not out of cruelty, but out of fear, pride, and misunderstanding. With everyone's eyes now open, honest conversations began. Apologies were exchanged. Promises were made, not just with words, but with actions. A new plan was created, one that included everyone, respected old intentions, but corrected what had been unfairly ignored. Samina, who had once been the loudest voice in the room, sat across from Zainab with quiet eyes. She didn't say much at first, but before the lawyer left, she walked over and placed the letters in Zainab's hand. "I was angry," she said softly, "but I see now we were both carrying things no one ever asked about." Zainab nodded, her eyes gentle. "We still have time to fix things." In the weeks that followed, the house felt lighter. The energy had shifted. Amina started helping Zainab organize family documents so that nothing would ever be hidden again. Conversations around the dinner table became more open. And slowly, respect replaced resentment. Zainab didn't become someone new. She stayed simple, quiet, and kind. But now, when she spoke, people listened not because her voice got louder, but because it finally had space to be heard. Her courage reminded everyone that justice doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it arrives softly with truth, strength, and the decision to stop being silent.